Next, we spotlight how security grows with scale. This panel explores how companies, whether early stage or enterprise, build and mature their product security programs.
Titled Product Security Maturity, we have with us our moderator, Vandana Verma, and our panelists, Ashwini Siddhi, Neelu Tripathi, and Sai Lakshmi Satyanarayana. Please welcome them on the stage with a big round of applause. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We'll make sure that we'll wrap it up on time, and we'll have ample of time to ask questions to these wonderful security leaders. So now all of you here are here for the product security. Some of you are very new to product security as well, or some of you are seasoned. So we will start with a very simple thing first. We will start off with the introduction, and we will answer what product security means to you. Because when we talk about product security for enterprise, it's something else. For startup or seed companies, it's different. So we will start off with their own experience, that what product security means to them and what experience they have in that. So we will start off with Sai, you first.
So good afternoon, everybody. I think after a nice sumptuous lunch, we have a challenge in front of us now. We'll try to keep it engaging and entertaining for y'all. Around the world, of course, product security. Now, it's a big word, of course. And before we start off, let me quick introduction about myself. Sai Lakshmi Satyanarayan, but I go by the name Sai. I've been in the industry for more than 28 years plus, all around in cybersecurity space. I'm a partner of one of the big fours. I lead the cybersecurity function for them, and always cybersecurity, of course, is very close to my heart because you take it to the customers, you make them aware of what needs to be done. And across, if you see the last few decades, things have changed. Customers are much more aware. It's much not just because of just an awareness. I think it's a combination of regulatory influence. They're being driven, they're being asked to, and sometimes they learn from their peers, or sometimes they have just been attacked. So they need to figure themselves out. So in all this context, when I look at the word product security as such, if you look at it, we generally associate product security with a technology firm trying to build a technology product as such, right? We are seeing that change. If you look at it, any organization, it is building technology or non-technology products, but as using technology to manage it or monitor it or build it. In all these contexts, the world of product security expands it at an enterprise level to see whatever they are building out for their businesses is secure enough. And so I would look at the product security as something what they build. Are they building it the right way? And not limited to only the technology elements of security. It comes with as simple as the people side, the process side, and of course the technology side.
Neelu, over to you.
So for me, it's we try to look at it rather simply that product security is security of the product end to end. That means starting from ideation, when you design, think of the product, when you think of the business requirements. So that's where it's so looking at requirements with the right kind of security requirements to having the design, having everything in between till you deploy it for the customer. And if the end customer data, so data is a big part of product anywhere, and all of that, the entire chain needs to be secure for the product to be secure. Take the traditional AppSec and, add additional layers to it in terms of if there's an hardware layer to it or if there's a cloud element to it. be it shipping an appliance, being hosting it on the cloud, anything of that sort, right? Software hosted anywhere is product security. So the entire holistic picture of it, simply put, AppSec++ is product security for me.
So, hi everyone, I'm Vandana. I'm taking care of product security for a product company in cybersecurity. Now, when we talk about product security, it's actually taken differently at different stages. So, my question to you, Neelu, is that when we talk about product security, it's a seed stage or a very naive stage, and then enterprise level. It's all different. Everyone perceives it different. So what's your perspective in it, that why should we actually think about these things differently, not like single layer? We're talking about security plus plus or AppSec plus plus, and then we're talking about different. So why is it different?
So there are various reasons why it becomes different, and we have to understand, first of all, what business you are in and what is critical for you in terms of data, in terms of systems, in terms of products that you're building for your clients, and then look at what you can essentially also afford to do in terms of security. So when you are a startup, you have to look at the priorities and then look at, once you understand the systems that you are working with, you'll be able to secure them much better. So you don't have to think of AI if you don't have AI in your product, right? You do not have to innovate where you do not do. The priorities for a startup would be the core data that you have, your intellectual property if you have a product, and for your systems, your assets which you have online. And that is all that you need to look at. I'm oversimplifying here, but when you an enterprise, which is a very large scale comes into picture.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest advantage that you have as a startup is that you do not have to worry about scale. A lot of things are manageable, controllable. You can have processes, you can have automation, everything end-to-end defined. But when it comes to being an enterprise, you have to think of so many other things, because you have your vendors, your suppliers, your customers or clients, depending on whether you're B2B or B2C. And then you have to think of all of that, regulations, everything comes into play. And at that scale, not everything works. In fact, I have seen systems, security products, and I've been on offense as well. Things break down when you're scanning at scale. Things break down when you're trying to secure at scale. And it does happen because they're working with systems. So there, the considerations are far different, because you're working for millions of requests will be coming in for your product. You have thousands of people that you have to look at from a security standpoint. So you have to worry about a lot of other things. So startup, although it looks, because the budgets are very low, it looks very difficult. It's the place where you can manage a lot of things very easily. The only key is to keep it evolvable. So it evolves gradually into the mid-scale and the higher scale.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And Sai, I remember when we were outside, we were talking about enterprise grade product security. So what's your take on that?
So if you look at it, if I just take the word product security and within an enterprise. So coming back to the point when we just earlier talked about was, if you for an enterprise, the product security becomes their brand. The product is their brand. Because if something goes wrong with that product in the market, it is that brand that gets affected. So there's a lot of stake, given if it's a listed or a non-listed company. It's just having to make sure they're tying up all the dots around from a risk standpoint and a security standpoint. So that's why it's key for them that they have, in enterprises, they look at it from an end-to-end life cycle, because it's about not having to just make sure getting an AppSec into a place or making sure a pen testing is done or all that. But it's making sure it is also attested from a security standpoint, because it's going to be a product which is standing out in the markets. There's a lot of stake for it. So given that they have to be looking at it, again, it is from a risk standpoint, it is from a process standpoint, what goes into it. Technology or what is being used within the product security will also have to be assessed. And the people who are a part of that whole chain will also have to be assessed. For instance, we are working on, I know that there are some of the technology companies who work on that product security, who have this entire life cycle of putting in security while in the product life cycle stages. whoever is working on that stages, I'm coming from the people standpoint, whoever is working on the stages, whatever technology elements that are used within those stages, whatever outcomes are coming out of those stages, all need to be looked at it in a more critical manner. Because if you actually look, that's what is in stake for it at the end of it.
The company's reputation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now that we have talked about that, what are the bare minimum requirements for a product security or a product to be secure? So Ashwini, question to you: that what are the frameworks or maybe some challenges or step-by-step guides that you've come across that has helped you shape up the product security for the companies that you worked with or the products that you worked with? Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so Dell predominantly used OWASP SAM. I'm sure you guys would have heard of it, software assurance model. So it talks about different stages of development, about design, requirements gathering and testing and deployment and all of these things. And it also talks about maturity levels. There are 1, 2, and 3. So you can start off at a baseline as you know, let's take an example, threat modeling, right? So just do a threat modeling as you're a startup and it's the first time you're coming up with your design. So you don't have to have a repeatable process which is well managed and the quality of output is like 100% there. No, you don't need it, right? You need to start. You need to first get there. So first do your threat modeling. That is your level 1 of maturity. And then the next maturity level, once you grow beyond your seed stage, you get some n number of customers, you're out there. And that's when you focus on quality of results and etc. and how you go back and fix them. And then you become, very well funded and probably, on your path to an enterprise, right? That's when you think about making it managed and making it repeatable and also making it optimized and efficient so that the people involved in security and the developers and the engineering team involved in security are not overburdened, so that it's seamless as development itself. So you have different maturity levels, 1, 2, 3. So I think OWASP SAM is a great example of implementing product security. Yes, there are other frameworks like NIST, SSDF and all of these things. But I go by OWASP SAM because we practically used it for Dell and it has worked for Dell because Dell at a point had 7 different technology companies under its umbrella. It could be RSA, it could be EMC, it could be VMware at that point. So many different companies, right? And it worked seamlessly for all of these organizations and I swear by OWASP SAM. So that's the framework I would go for and I would recommend all of you to go for. Yeah, there's something quick that I want to add. See, there are many standards and standards are there to help us, to give us direction. I often think we should have more from India, but that's another story. We have OWASP, we have NIST, we have many guidelines that way to follow, but I'll give you a difference between, and it's a very practical experience for me over the years. We had this program that we were running security champions when we were taking developers and QA folks and others and, teaching them how to do threat modeling. Since she gave a threat modeling example, you have a STRIDE framework that all of us know, right? We can start and go ahead with STRIDE. But when you look at a system, you look at the architecture, we would have it on the board. Gradually your mindset should turn to a place where you're not at all looking at STRIDE anymore. And you understand what is the risk for your system because it has a certain context behind it. It has a certain data. You know that it integrates with other systems where something can be a risk, although that may not have been on the STRIDE model. So while all these frameworks are there to help us, over a period of time, with the maturity of your teams, you should look at the right context and we should be looking at what impacts our business, practically what is more important for us, because that is what should get the right kind of criticality and move into remediation later on. If we are going ahead with, so STRIDE can give you some theoretical risks also, threats also, which may not really materialize given you may have some control somewhere which you have not thought of. But at the same time, you're looking at the system critically and you understand what is the goal, what is the essence of threat modeling, then you know the right threats for your business. So I think that is one thing that we should always prioritize because that is what is practical and that is what is also sustainable for many, many businesses.
I totally agree with you. Especially when we talk about risk, third-party risk was a real challenge. And when we talk about open source, now there was one research done by Linux Foundation where they said that 80 to 90% of the software that we use is actually open source. because we are just repurposing it. So now, while we are actually repurposing our core and a lot of other things, how should we deal with third-party risks and open source security? So I'll start with you, and then I want to ask this to you as well, Sai.
Open source is a big area. I think it can be a panel in
My favorite one.
But open source, as the name suggests, see, the idea is that, like Sai was saying, there are many people behind the systems, and meaning there are many maintainers. There are multiple kind of risks that recently we are seeing, because that has become a very good weak spot for attackers to attack. Many of these are not checked. The systems, and since we are building that now and designing that, I understand it takes a lot of pain to build that. But once you have those kind of systems in place, it really helps. For example, we always talk about libraries, dependencies, and the security thereof. Having a good dependency management system from the very beginning is a big win for, somewhere when you have gone beyond startup, where you can invest on a dependency management. You can actually scan your dependencies, you can version them, you can pin certain dependencies, you can look at, not picking up just the latest dependencies whenever you are, because many times dependency confusion and other kind of attacks do happen like that. So making sure that you have integrity, that you have a declarative way of working, and that is something I'm seeing a lot. It's an engineering concept, the declarative way of building things, the declarative way of defining what version of dependency you need in your product. So having that level of transparency really helps security a lot, because later on you know exactly what went into your software and what version it needs to be. So that will also come with your commit signing and a lot of other concepts that you can use for designing good dependency management systems that will, in one shot, take care of a lot of open source security for you.
I have some thoughts around it. And while Neelu gave a perspective of it from the inside out, we look at it from an enterprise standpoint, right? Most enterprises, which are of a decent size and they know that they want to be having a secure focus towards whatever they're building out, at the same time, they also want to be secure. They do have these common things which they will do. For instance, they will have a security strategy which they will have in place, where they want to act upon, where they want to have their products to be built upon. And the security strategy, I'm coming from the top. So it also builds on how they will build the solutions, and the others, how they would look at their vendors who are contributing to the ecosystem of building to the solutions. So that comes under an area which most organizations try to do it with a broader sense, called as the third-party risk management. They do that with TPRM. Most TPRM as such is looked at it from external suppliers who are meeting certain of the security aspects, right? So you go through a checklist-based approach, it becomes a tick in the box. While that is there, because it's also they have to be doing evidences and provide it, I'm coming to the point there. It's mainly also giving a perspective that whoever are the suppliers or vendors or any tools which are being used as a product security, within the product security, they also are accountable. So while Neelu mentioned about it, is an inside-out approach, because what you build, we are having checking all of it. But you need to bring accountability also to that vendor or provider at the same time, and also making sure that they are not having tools which is again gone through. See, it's like a ripple effect, right? They might have built in using these tools, they might have built external tools. Again, they might have used some open source tools, or they might have used a team which in a very, in one of those regions which some of the for instance, US companies don't like to have their engineering sitting out of certain countries in the world because of the conflicts and as such. So they have to go through all that also. And that's why I'm looking at it as, when we look at it at an enterprise level, we look at it from the larger, broader span. So does it mean that for product security, we need to have all of this in place? You have to, but you don't need to have it only for it. Leverage all the functions which are built out for the enterprise security. Don't make them do only for what they are as a checkbox to meet certain federal or regulatory criteria. Make them invest to work towards building on within your solution engineering as such. You have to leverage all these functions. And I think that's one of the key things, because otherwise we can't solve all the problems at all time. That's when there's an enterprise which is investing on all these functions, you have to integrate that.
Oh, I agree. Totally agree.
And that also comes in, it makes it, the more integrated it is across the enterprise, it makes it more invested with people to work towards it. So that's the combination which you'll see. And we'll come to the people part later as such.
So I will ask one last question to all the three ladies, and then we'll open it up for any questions that you might have. So this question is to all three of you. Where one learning from your product security journey that you want to share it with everyone. Generally, stories stay with people. So it's not like the technical jargons, but the stories that you have from your journeys, I would like to know, and I'm sure everyone wants to know as well.
So as always in the consulting world, right, we work with a lot of our customers. And this is one of our financial services customers. And this is coming to the point I mentioned. As the product security need not be a technology solution. It's a technology area which has been built to address to some of their customer markets. So this particular customer, we're building out I would say it was more of they were web enabling their mainframe systems. Okay, so mainframe systems, most of the financial services have mainframe systems and all the data is sitting on those green boxes out there. So now given with the change in way of how things are organized, getting into more digital transformation, there is a legacy migration that needs to come in. So there's a lot of interlock that goes in building systems, working with them. So in this case, normally you will have, and this is where I would talk about how Ashwini mentioned, it's App Security Plus. You have the entire threat modeling, the security architecture, because you're exposing that mainframe data to the world. So there are a lot of layers you bring it in. And this, I was the architect for that. So one of the key things always, I'm coming to the people point of it, is to my design, which I had built out, there were like 75 signatories for it. Mm-hmm. So having 75 people to sign off on that design, because they're all different parts of the business, was imagine the architect who's sitting out there to go through it. So it worked. I finished my design in 3 months, but I was waiting for 6 months to get the design signed off. So when the customer realized and we worked together, so one of the things which first thing is we got a champion, a security champion who comes in from the business, actually who can take you through.
Right.
So that means if a business is not invested in the product security side, it will be a tech story.
Yeah.
So when they brought in the person who worked along with me to make that tech story, I was a techie at that time. So turned it around and we just turned around the solution, built everything done, got it to the web, tested everything. What the design document, which took 6 months to sign off, the implementation was done in 1 month. So you can see the change of an influencer in a business, especially for product security, someone who rests with the tech team to work with you.
Right.
Especially in larger organizations, what works is at scale you have to automate. And the biggest strength that you have is secure your systems by design. If you can do that, I think 60-70% of issues are taken care of. Other things can be implementation details that went wrong and a lot of other things in the supply chain. But something that trumps that slightly overlaps with what Sai was saying. Behind all these systems are people, and I think the biggest thing that you should work on if you are into product security is changing that mindset. So I'll tell you that's a story. There was Log4j that happened. Oh yeah, it wasn't a great December for us. By that time, we were running a few programs, and we were a very small security team. We had built a huge network of, in our scale, huge, like around 300 security champions, and we were taking the help for a lot of automation here and there. But when Log4j struck, that's when we really saw that yes, we have, because security mindset is not tangible. You don't know, you can't measure it. But in that 1 week, when 2.15 was affected, 2.16 came, 2.17 came in that 2 weeks, we worked with these people. We had a session with them. They just went through, there are multiple tech stacks that we're working with, so many of them that we couldn't have possibly done it in a week's time. And the attacks had started happening and a lot of that. And they came together. They started working with us to come up with different variations, to work on different scripts, different alternate controls on different tech stacks, of course, apart from WAF, and somebody was helping with the cloud, because there were issues in the cloud infra also with Log4j, a lot of other things. And everybody came together and we were so surprised as a security team that it is possible. So I think mindset is what is at the center of all of this. If you change that, or if you can even mature that to an extent, a lot of your job is done.
Right. All right, I'll give you story to take back when I was a techie and not in the management position. This was early in my career, during one of my first on-site assignments with the UNHCR. I was really excited to be there at their IT center. So I go there and first day meet everybody. And then they're like, okay, go do your thing. And I just sit at my desk and give the IP addresses and start the vulnerability scanning and bring the entire network down, right? I'm sure all of you would have read this as a meme, or some of you might have done this already, but everything comes down and then obviously people are panicking and all of these things. And then they figure out what went wrong and bring it up. Also, at the same time, luckily for me, there was a ransomware attack, right? And because these systems were down, they were saved from the attack. So that's somehow me, situationally me saving myself. But the story that I learned, or the lesson that I learned from this event, was that scope of what you have to do is matters, right? So the first thing that you do with product security or security in general is understand the scope of what you're doing, right? Identify, there are 100 things that you can do with respect to product security. It's a continuous game of, continuous improvement over 10 years and beyond. So start small, understand what is that is required, the core of the matter, strategize that bit, and then attack that bit, right? The smallest, smartest thing that you can do with security, and focus on that. Don't just go about doing everything. So that's the story that I have to tell you. All right. Thank you so much. Those are wonderful stories. And the main thing is that we need to have right security champions who can help us out with the product security. Now, before we wrap up, any questions from the audience? All right. Thank you. It was an insightful session. I have 2 questions, actually. I hope I'll wrap it quickly. So one question is, when you are trying to do threat modeling, or to understand what is the attack surface you have, what are the best practices that you would suggest in terms of assigning the security maturity level for the assets, interfaces and assets, when you're trying to draft the attack surface? So how are the security maturity level assigned for the assets and interfaces? Maybe so you're talking about threat modeling a specific product, or everything in the product? Everything around the product, as in the web application or hardware and all together. Yeah, so I think in threat modeling, we don't really go about assigning a priority to assets by themselves. So when you do a threat modeling activity, you try to identify, first you map out all of the attack surfaces, right? They could be your entry points where an attacker could enter into the system. It could be anything, right? Web interfaces, ports, services. And you also look at your internal attack surfaces, in the sense, what is that you're trying to protect? Your protect surfaces. Where is your data? Data is your crown jewel, right? That is what you're trying to protect. So if this goes wrong, there's something really devastating going to happen. So you'll need to focus on that too. So you identify attack surfaces at such, and then call out threats for each of these attack surfaces, and then prioritize them based on the risk. So if you're prioritizing just the attack surfaces in the threat modeling activity already, I think it's a little too soon in the game. So it should be based on the threat, and that's why it's called threat modeling, and not just mere attack surfaces. So the context that I was referring to was the combinational. So when we have embedded systems within the product, and there are also web applications that work together as a single product. So in cases like that, we also have an attack surface that is mapped for the embedded systems, and also for the web applications, threat modeling is done. So when these two come together, and we have to understand the risk portfolio for a product, So then I think the security level that we will have to assign for different assets and interfaces. So on that, maybe
I think in that scenario, you would have to go with the simple formula of what is the likelihood and impact, right? So you have n number of apps coming together to make a solution or a platform to work for you as a business. So something has a payment gateway and probably needs to be aligned to financial regulations. There could be loss of money or legal implications and reputation in the specific aspect of the platform or the product itself. So that is an important attack surface for you. Whereas something is internal, it's just used for read purposes only, where the data is not sensitive. So you prioritize based on what is the impact to business and reputation and legal damages and financial losses. And based on that formula, you make out a list of top 10 or whatever, and then prioritize threat modeling those systems by themselves again.
got it. Thank you.
I think just one thing I'd like to add here. See, attacks are not linear. Attacks are, whatever works is an attack, whatever is possible. So you have to always think from a business perspective. From the business perspective, what will make more sense to an attacker, and it's easier, of course, exposure is there, all that, what Ashwini was talking about. But in general, you will have critical issues maybe in the firmware side also, you'll have on the web side also. Now you want to prioritize, you have different teams working on remediation, and if you want to choose, you have to see from a business perspective what will be more harmful. In the context, what attack will actually work. Because some attacks, although they may look very fancy, they may not actually materialize.
So I'm from Honeywell. My name is Subramanian. I'm working as an advanced product security engineer, like pen testing proper. So from pen testing to architect, there is a journey. So I've seen that for the pen testing perspective, when we interact with the architects, right, they have a holistic view. Now we are more into the pen testing part. So if someone wants to get it, is it a specific roadmap? Because I've seen that there are people suggesting many certifications with respect to CSP or CISP or something. So which is the ideal thing, which most of the cases where we can just get the security principle done and, get into the zone of architect?
I think, I can take that. So, see, from an architecture perspective, what I would say is slightly non-security. So I was also into the same of OffSec. I have a decade of OffSec background and I still love it. OffSec gives you an attacker's perspective, which is very, very valuable in a space where you are talking about functional aspects only in architecture. But you have to understand architecture itself is a functional space. So whether you're doing security architecture, whether you're doing software architecture, because there's a lot of software architecture that I'm doing today in spite of being a security architect, is you have to understand systems. So, for example, you're doing a SAST, you're doing a code review, you have to really understand the tech stack, you have to understand how the integrations work, how the code works and all of that. Similarly, you have to understand how the entire system works. In case of software architecture, you have to understand how software works in general, which is end-to-end is a universe in itself, because you're not talking about one component, because we only see as attackers, we see the web. But there is the app server, there are the gateway, there's the entire infrastructure that is below it, there is a backend, there are data stores, the data is going to data lakes, and of course with AI, a lot of other attack surfaces will open up. So you have to understand the entire component set. You should be able to modularize, you should have a very structured thinking for being an architect in general, forget about security architect, and your security fundamentals have to be very clear. So from an attacker's perspective, you can still attack and get through sometimes, and over a period of time, you get that expertise. But the best attackers, I'll give you an example, and it's very close to my heart. It's not an attack that I did, somebody else who I look up to. We generally attack on HTTP, and we found an RC over ICMP. Can you imagine that? Right? So that's why I say it's non-linear, but it's important for you to be able to understand the fundamentals and understand the systems that you will design in future. So it takes a lot. So that's why maybe CISSP, but maybe more than that.
So just to add a little bit onto that.
Sure.
So I think many of us have actually come through that same kind of a path. And I'm so glad that you are asking that, because for us who came in through that path, like how Neelu is also, she's been very conservative about her path as such, from what I've spoken about you. One thing I would say is understand the software development lifecycle. Understand what it takes to build a software, and the switch of our mindset from when you are doing the PTE as such, right? It's the point is like going after finding the flaws. The mindset changes to solution it, right? Not hiding the flaws, but it's about solutioning. You're building something. And that mindset change is first required. And that comes in, you have to spend time with your development teams. Start from the working along with taking some pieces of work, doing some testing, building out some small dev work, and then you will get to understand the nuances of it as such. And as simple as even also reading up the business requirements document and even writing one as such will help you on that. So sorry, some brass tack tips which came in.
Yeah, I think when you read those documents, it's very important. They teach you how exactly the software is being built, how exactly architecture is being built. And especially if you start writing, trust me, it takes time, but that actually gives you a perspective. Now we'll take one last question and then we can take questions outside because the next panel is waiting.
So my question is related towards the EU CRA and the impact of the product security. So EU CRA is going to be applicable maybe in the 2027 and it has a lots of requirement related towards the product security. And the way we are building the product security in the organization and the enterprise are basically a matured level, things like level 1, level 2 and level 3. But CRA has some penalties associated with it if you are not fulfilling some of the requirements that are a little bit higher at the maturity level. So what is your vision on the impact of product security and the way we are building the AppSec program once the CRA is going to be applicable in the EU? Because at the end, everyone wants to sell their product in the EU and maybe all over the globe. So it is going to be impact all over the organization that are outside the EU. So is it going to change the process, the way we are building the AppSec program, or what are the changes that we can expect from it?
I can take it. EU CRA is still in works. So it's for review. So yes, it's the intent is to change how product security happens, right? That's the whole intention. So a lot of organizations just to sell in different markets claim reasonable security. And what is reasonable? The definition varies from organization to organization, which obviously they claim it's based on strategy, the risk appetite and all of these things. But when you really delve deeper, you see that they're not reasonable enough. So, and then that's when the fines and legal aspects come into picture. So that is what EU CRA wants to correct, right? So it wants every single product, including open source products that we use and will solve the third-party component issue, right? So it's trying to achieve a standardization of cyber security controls or product security controls within a specific product or system or anything that is built, right? So I think it will give you that as an end user or as a customer, it will give you that trust factor on every product that's built saying that, okay, this is secure. It is EU CRA certified. So I think the aim is to achieve that. Yes, it's going to cause a lot of churn and heartburn to enterprises because now they'll have to do more, they'll have to hire more and probably reinvent some of the things in terms of how they look up product security and adjust their processes and all of these things. Yes, it's going to cause some impact, but that is the intent of it. Eventually, we'll see some great differences. It's a long-term planning that's going to happen. And I look at it as a positive than a negative.
So by looking at this point, we can expect like the maturity we are going to achieve at the level 2, we can achieve in the early phases if we want to fulfill some of the requirements from the CRA.
Yes, I think it depends on the organizational intent, right? I mean, if you want to be aligned to CRA, at what level, at what maturity, and how you want to be put out in the EU market, it depends on the intent and the business strategy of the organization. So yes, if you want to, then I think most organizations would do.
All right, that's a wrap. We actually discussed a lot about what product security is all about when it comes to the startups, enterprise level, and we talked about how we can actually move from a VAPT role to a product security architect role and whatnot. We talked about especially the stories. So thank you so much for joining me today here and sharing your experiences. Thank you. And thanks all of you to join me at the panel. Thank you.
Thanks to you all.